The path of prophecy can be cruel and unforgiving. To be chosen is to have the burden of overwhelming responsibility thrust upon your shoulders. To be sent on a lonely path that no other can travel. My journey has taken me to the four corners of Vardenfell, to bear witness to its wonders, as well as to its atrocities that I could do nothing about, for it was not my duty. Though my heart may be pure, the labors asked of the Chosen One lead to questioning. Do the ends justify the means? Am I proud of the man I've become? They say you should never meet your heroes, and having met myself, I know this to be wise. For one as tormented as I, it's important to take a rare moment of respite to reflect upon the past, to keep myself grounded. For it is your experiences, your memories, your soul that defines what kind of hero you will be.
Anytime you enter a menu, I go, what the fuck am I looking at? Every time I do anything, I go, what the fuck am I playing? Like, watch, I'm gonna play some Morrowind, guys. Here, take some more fucking dice. Wait for you. You're right here. Why are you... Thank you for joining me. Let's move. Morrowind, starting out. This is a list of hints to help you start your adventures in Vardenfell on a good note. For more tips, see any of the following. Cheats. Various cheats to modify and manipulate the game. Glitches. A list of known glitches that appear in Morrowind. It's like, yeah, I am ready to go on this trip. Fuck's sake. Morrowind, I'm trying to compliment you. I'm trying to say you're a good game.
I was not a good hero.
The Elder Scrolls is a franchise I have a lot of good memories with. Since my first playthrough of Skyrim in 2018, it's become an annual tradition on my channel to experience some new, exciting adventure in Tamriel during the summer. This means that in the grand scheme of things, I'm still a relatively new fan of the Elder Scrolls, starting with Skyrim before moving on to Oblivion, but the stories and the worlds I explored in those games set my expectations for Morrowind very high. Morrowind is widely considered to be a masterpiece of a game, and considered by many to be the pinnacle of the Elder Scrolls series. With such a dominating reputation, it was easy for me to be excited about playing this game. I play Elder Scrolls games to come up with fun, unorthodox playstyles, to relax by taking in the scenery and majesty of the open world, and to engage with the countless narratives and questlines that these games have to offer. The concept of getting the best of all of that in Morrowind was something I was very much looking forward to. My character for this playthrough was Jeelam Vex, the hyperactive Argonian mage. Rather than going for my typical playstyle, some variant of a spell sword, I intended to play through the game as a pure mage with an emphasis on mobility and speed. My class was Updog, equally proficient in the arcane and acrobatic arts. And unlike my previous characters, both of which were some form of not very good people, Jeelam Vex was intended to be wholeheartedly good, with excessive eagerness to learn new magic and absolutely no consideration for the consequences of his actions while testing it. He doesn't mean to do harm, he just doesn't think things through all the way. But Jeelam Vex did not develop in the way that I anticipated, predominantly due to Morrowind's early game. Unlike later games in the series, Morrowind does not have enemy level scaling. The easiest and strongest enemies are at their full power from the moment your journey starts. I was properly warned that the first few levels of the game are a brutal grind, but nothing could have prepared me for the degree to which this world wanted you dead. The same sense of peace I found exploring the overworld in other Elder Scrolls games was gone, as I found I couldn't take a step in the wrong direction without being brutally murdered by swarms of cliff racers. I limit my usage of fast travel in some open world RPGs, but Morrowind doesn't have free fast travel at all, so with no gold to my name, finding it difficult to deal with the places I ended up in, I felt absolutely helpless to enjoy the game the way I wanted to. And it's a damn shame that the level of danger dissuaded exploration, because the game is beautiful. Morrowind presents to you a gorgeous world in that early 2000s jagged 3D graphical style that I adore so much. The alien nature of Vardenfell is captivating, and I was blown away by the graphical fidelity of a game from this era. The water in particular really stood out. My biggest complaint graphically was with some of the game's ashy regions. I was a bit turned off by the amount of brown and grey land with minimal landmarks, but the more vibrant and mushroomy regions more than made up for this. And then we introduced the extremely high quality soundtrack that I've come to expect from Elder Scrolls games, and I just get sucked into Morrowind's presentation entirely. However, the stellar presentation is a facade. The world, a carrot on a string. It's literally bait. You want to explore early, but it's just so difficult and punishing to do so. I quickly realized that my character concept was doomed to fail from both a mechanical and a roleplay perspective. I found combat magic in Morrowind to be incredibly unrewarding, mostly from the fact that magicka does not regenerate in this game as it does in later Elder Scrolls games. While spellcrafting is still available, the limitations placed on your ability to cast magic restricted the usefulness of the system. When many of the stronger enemies are resistant to magic, it made me wonder why I would ever cast a destruction spell when conjuring a spear was overwhelmingly more useful. Based on my time with Oblivion, I understood that I needed to build up my character's capabilities, but I never found reliable destruction magic in this system, instead resorting to almost exclusive usage of conjuration. And while Morrowind does have some of the most enjoyable utility spells in the series like Jump, Levitate, and Almsthievi Intervention, the fact remains that the system as a whole felt extremely confining. I eventually discovered a new playstyle for Jelan Vex, a super acrobatic, unarmored spear fighter, constantly on the move and exploiting his range to overcome his low defenses. And that's when I discovered the other major limiting factor to Morrowind. You are a slave to your fatigue. Unlike later entries, fatigue isn't simply a metric that limits your power attacks and sprinting. Instead, it governs absolutely everything you do. Morrowind functions fundamentally on a system of hidden dice rolls. You can fail to cast spells, you can fail to hit with your weapons, you can fail to create potions, which does consume your ingredients. Random failure just exists in this game, and the chance of that happening is directly tied to your level of fatigue. As your fatigue meter drops, your chance of failure is raised from the pre-existing baseline chance to fail at literally anything, including speaking to people. The RNG nature of Morrowind is infuriating. When I swing a sword, I expect it to hit. When I cast a crucial heal spell, I expect it to work. Progression in my head should be tied to your melee damage increasing over time as you boost your stats and find better weapons, and your spell pool increasing by becoming proficient enough to cast new and exciting spells. Instead, you technically have access to top level damage and spells right off the bat. You're just going to fail at it often, and the consequences of this system spill over into lower level damage, which negatively affects the low level combat. I do not think it's good game design to just passively have a chance to not be rewarded for good decision making, and I greatly prefer Oblivion's reliable but weak start to your character. Between magicka not replenishing, almost acting like spell slots, and hidden dice governing everything, Morrowind feels less like a video game and more as though it was designed as a tabletop RPG with a dungeon master who thinks it's their job to win against the players. As far as roleplay is concerned, I found it hard to be invested in making decisions as my character when I was instead forced to make decisions solely to stay alive and to try to have fun with the game. But at the very least, I could use that underlying character to choose what in the game to pursue first, which led me to the Mages Guild. And what I discovered was a guild that made it very difficult to stick to a consistent moral code. I spent ages doing busy work and menial tasks, and after being asked to do increasingly unethical things which could risk my membership in the guild, I found little motivation to continue. I kept putting down and coming back to the Mages Guild quests, and eventually I discovered a tragic truth. There is no underlying narrative to the Mages Guild. There is no story, only duties, and I had it confirmed that all guilds are like this. Of the joinable factions, none had their own main stories, a crucial element that keeps me invested in Elder Scrolls games. Outside of having access to Mages Guild perks like teleportation and spell merchants, the guild play was wholly unrewarding. And this tragically does extend to almost all of Morrowind's side quests too. I found most quests entirely unengaging with just a very shallow narrative holding them together. Most, if not all, side quests are either escort quests or fetch quests. Escorting an NPC in this game is incredibly frustrating. They often don't match your speed, they get stuck on terrain, and they die extremely easily. On the odd occasion that I found a side quest with a story that interested me or one that encouraged me to explore, I found that many side quests were extremely short. Here's the situation, here's the development, here's the twist, now it's over. After completing enough of these, I rarely felt any drive to pursue side content in Morrowind. I played 60 hours of Morrowind, the first 20 of which were not fun at all. My Morrowind playthrough coincided with the absolute worst semester of my life. I had an overloaded and difficult course load and a part-time job while also dealing with COVID lockdown and depression. And then when I finally had free time, I went to go play a game that seemed designed to beat me into the ground by virtue of numbers and random chance rather than player skill. Playing Morrowind, I genuinely considered quitting partway through my playthrough, something that never even crossed my mind for any other game that I've streamed. But one thing kept me going. This game is terrible, I thought. So, if it's so critically acclaimed, then its story must be so good that it offsets everything about the gameplay.
We all spend time drifting aimlessly at some point in our lives. As we spread our wings and leave the nest, the entire world opens up. The familiar comforts of home replaced with the allure of fresh, new experiences, and the anxiety and paralysis of figuring out what in this life is worth living. For a time, I believed my purpose to be the pursuit and mastery of the arcane arts, learning all I could about magic to improve the lives of others. It was going great until I remembered that I don't understand magic. Now, I am a wanderer, my purpose unknown, my mind spiraling towards depression. If I am nothing, am I truly living? Everything I see and feel, is it for naught? But it's in times like these that we must remember that the journey is less lonely than we believe. The familiar comforts of home beckon, guiding you to a long-forgotten dream. I should probably do that thing I was supposed to do. I was kind of explicitly prophesized to do it.
When I realized that there was no enjoyment for me to be had elsewhere, I immediately returned to the main story, and what I discovered blew me away. This is where Morrowind shines. This is its greatest redeeming factor. Morrowind's narrative benefits hugely from its world building. The island of Vardenfell is just such an interesting place culturally and historically. It's refreshing to experience a world that's very clearly not based on European influences like so many other high fantasy settings. The cities, religions, indigenous groups, Daedric cults, they're all so fleshed out and detailed, and they benefit greatly from being in the greater context of the lore of Tamriel. The main story of Morrowind asks you to explore so many of these cultures, to meet so many interesting people. The quests along the story are unquestionably the most fleshed out and engaging quests in the game, many of which have completely unique objectives. Morrowind's storyline asks you to engage so deeply with the game's lore that it's thoroughly immersive, to the point that every single one of my complaints with the game were forgotten for a time. Or at least until some new bug reminded me that this game is held together by duct tape. The quality does extend to the game's two expansion packs, Tribunal and Blood Moon, though the former is far higher quality narrative-wise than the latter. Both expansions have their own unique story and regions to explore, with the same care put into the world building as was evident in Vardenfell. In these packs too, I was immersed completely. I was enjoying my time with the game, and considering just how much I hated what came before, speaks to the masterful quality of the core worlds and stories of the Morrowind experience. Something that supplements the story very well is the game's speech system. There's a lot of reading involved with this interface, but I really liked how many topics we were able to ask people about. Knowledgeable NPCs became excellent sources of lore when asked about lots of topics, and general NPCs were very useful for learning more about the area, but this system does have its flaws. Firstly, the selection of topics could be frustrating. I'd find moments where something I wanted to know more about wasn't a conversation option, while completely useless topics were, and those useless ones end up cluttering your interface. Secondly, there's almost no distinction between the more general NPCs. If you've talked to one of them, you've talked to almost all of them in the same city. These really don't feel like people after a while. Thirdly, so many problems just go away when you get money because large bribes are completely overpowered. No more disagreements. Sharing is good. As I leveled up and progressed along the main storyline, the game became a lot more playable. It was far more likely that I would hit and succeed on my spellcasts, but I came to realize that was because I was mostly overpowered. At some point, the game flips a switch. You go from utterly useless to way better than most enemies. The game's balance is questionable at best, with my bound spear being my core weapon from the moment I got it early on to the very end of my playthrough. Almost every fight felt as though it had a predetermined outcome, though there were some instances later on that were genuinely enjoyable tests of skill with enemies at about my power level that allowed the good parts of the combat system to really shine. More often, there was something substantially stronger or weaker than me, the former feeling absolutely unbeatable until the right consumable made it trivial. Moments like these are what constantly reminded me of my complaints from the beginning of the game, long after it had become enjoyable. I have many more tiny things to say about this game, so it's time for the speed round. Every time you boot up the game, all your settings are reset, forcing you to reconfigure them all for each new play session. This game is buggy as shit. Getting stuck on walls and random objects is super common, and I found myself needing to use the console to toggle collision very often. NPC pathing is horrible, often blocking your path in cities and getting lost during escort quests. Quest critical items found on bodies can permanently despawn if the body does, soft locking your game unless you cheat it back in. This game is buggy as shit. The inventory interface is horrible. Many items look exactly the same, and without text, inventory management becomes needlessly time-consuming. Equipping items and drinking potions takes far more inputs than it really should, especially when dealing with stacks of items. Being called an Enwa hurts my feelings. I don't think I ever stopped spamming rest between every encounter because you're so useless without fatigue. This game is buggy as shit. I like how NPCs give actual directions to places, but when those directions are wrong, I curse whoever made that decision. The Argonian walk cycle is the greatest thing I've ever seen in a video game, and I love it. There was no reason for your base mobility to be this horrible. How do you even play this game with any playstyle that isn't based on melee combat? Finally, this game is buggy as shit! Morrowind is a game that I was not prepared to dislike. There are components of this game that reach genuine masterpiece quality, and the story and the world are absolutely worth experiencing, but there are so many elements that are either completely archaic, openly hostile to players, or wholly inappropriate for a video game. Morrowind doesn't feel like it was designed as a video game. It's an incredible tabletop RPG that's limited by the medium it's in, which means it's a terrible video game. Now, I did have fun with Morrowind's most fleshed out elements, or I would have quit playing, but there is so much here to dislike. For that reason, I can't recommend Morrowind to everyone, and I'd recommend Oblivion over Morrowind any day. If you know what you're getting yourself into and you know to stick with the main story content, then there is fun to be had here. And maybe if you like extremely hardcore, punishing RPGs that you can sink a lot of time into, you might like Morrowind through and through. It is very critically acclaimed after all, but I value games that respect my time and present me with difficult but fair challenges, and Morrowind does not fit that bill. My labors completed, I find myself with time to rest. I faced many hardships on my journey, and found great joy among greater suffering. But I now know that this life is not for me. Prophecy laid out a path for me. I begrudgingly accepted, waiting for my time to be free of it. I am no hero, after all. My purpose is simpler. I am but a humble content creator, destined to produce more reviews, guides, and highlights like this video. I beseech all those who hear my plea to consider supporting me on this journey by leaving a like or a subscription. Please, accept my hospitality and join me for my streams at twitch.tv/Quintic. For the road traveled together is the road most worth traveling.